Welcome, IT changemakers, to the DEX Show with Tim Flower and Tom McGraw. Let's get into it.
Hello, changemakers. Welcome to another episode of Reality Bytes. Today I'm joined by Dina, Sean, and Tim, and I will need their help a little more than usual because I am whatever the opposite of fresh is. I am the opposite of fresh off of a red eye from Boston, where I spent 2 nights, and I've had about an hour's sleep sat up in coach. So I'm feeling a little rough around the edges, Tim, and I know you know a lot about these work trips, these bad night sleep. So you're gonna have to help out today, even more than usual, sir, if that's okay.
It's all good, and you know what? As someone who travels frequently, Tom, I feel your pain. It can be a struggle.
It
The
can be
struggle is
brutal,
real.
can't it? But we have a pretty interesting topic as well, which is going to require everybody else to be, I think, rather sharper than me. But I think that's almost inevitable any week, let alone this one. It is the theme is around Copilot Plus, and just a little bit of background for people. We actually had some really interesting conversations, Sean and I in particular, with a customer who must go unnamed, who drew our attention to their interest in the new Copilot Plus enabled PCs that Microsoft announced a couple of months ago, and how this kind of factored into their plans around hardware renewal and around AI, both on the DEX side, but also on the side of the machines themselves. So we thought it was a perfect storm, and we're gonna explore the use case that they described and some of the issues around these new PCs in general. So let's start, Sean. Maybe you can set the scene for us, the people who haven't been following the story already. What is Copilot Plus, and what in particular are the Copilot Plus enabled PCs all about?
Sure. So first off, to break it down, so Microsoft Copilot, without the plus, is the generative artificial intelligence chatbot developed by Microsoft. Adding the plus, it's basically an AI PC. So it's like a term used for a series of new laptops, next-gen AI features that you can only use on a computer with an NPU that's capable of 40 TOPS, so 40 trillion operations per second, which we have our experts to unpack and explain to all of us with limited neurons today, including myself. But that's really the difference. So it's just like it has a huge boost in power, but more importantly, efficiency in the operations that it's conducting. And I saw just quickly, because I know Dina can explain this better than any of us, but to compare it to like a traditional PC, I think like something with 20 core processors, there's some output of like 440 watts. With these new Copilot Plus PCs, it just takes one NPU and it's like less than 5 watts of energy. I don't know if that's just to turn it on or what, but that kind of gives you an idea of just how efficient it is. It's like taking a Prius and a Ferrari and putting it together.
Whoa.
So I'll stop there, and then we can jump into some more good stuff.
Dina, you may or may not want to unpack what some of that means, but I'm actually directly interested, Dina. How much I'm sure you're already aware of these machines. How much do they excite you in terms of their potentiality, and how impressive is the technology from where you're sat?
Well, Prius and Ferrari, right? So if we start there, that's efficiency, speed, and everything that's super, right? At the same time. So you'll get an output, and you could have that in a very reliable way. So it excites me a lot to actually just see all of this happening as quickly as it is. If you go back, I don't know, 8 months ago when we started talking about GPTs and how AIs are into the picture, and this is 8 months in, it's amazing and fantastic how the results have been improving, how fast, how good, and how accurate they are becoming on so many levels from that perspective. So AI is growing, will continue growing, and it's at bigger paces. The more we use it, the better it learns and grows.
I just knew Dina would be hyped about this. I knew it. But what to go from a sort of abstract to the particular, Sean, there are some pretty cool features which Microsoft have already kind of unveiled that come with or are built into these new functions. What stood out to you about them, and where do you think they could make a difference to employees?
Yeah, there's several good ones. I think at the top of the list that they particularly promote is this feature called recall. So it's basically a faster way to search and use like a timeline look back on things that any type of document you're working on, you can kind of just trace, and it almost is like taking capture an image of what you've done on the device and where you've been. So you could even like search, say you're working on a PowerPoint and you remember you were on a particular slide that was green and there was a chart with a light bulb, and that's all you kind of need for a prompt, and it can help you find that. I think we spend a lot of our time searching for documents and conversations, and they can also Copilot Plus PC can help with things like summarizing like an email thread, you know, especially when you've dealt with like budget issues that have their tentacles in multiple departments. You can just kind of get to the heart of it and see what each person said quickly for you. Another one I thought was interesting is just have it provide a recap of like a meeting that you're on with other folks. So you don't have somebody else note taking, you really have everybody present and actively following along, and kind of push some of those tasks to the AI. I mean, obviously the other big one is too that like it can work for hours, the device, on just a single charge. So we know how annoying that is when you have to constantly charge your battery. So that's,
I hadn't seen that one. That's cool.
yeah, and it just goes on. There's a lot of other stuff too that I haven't looked at too much, but more of like graphic design and even like I believe video editing, which really opens it up to novices like ourselves, where we can kind of, you know, manufacture and manipulate images and things like that for presentations, which is nice.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Actually reminds me, Tim, of we had a last episode. We had Christy and Kelly on the show talking to us about the way certain AI functionalities can be used by managers to kind of, or, you know, to better analyze group calls, to see who was and wasn't confident in their contributions, and just this sort of the permeation of AI into how we work is really, really interesting, both from the employee level, the managerial level, and of course the IT level, which we'll get to. But on that employee level, Tim, what any of the features that stood out to you in terms of things that would actually kind of impact the way you might work or someone might work?
Yeah, I think the first commentary is the technology always leads the trust of the technology. So we've got to build trust that the tech is being used for good and not evil, especially when we're dealing with employees' careers and managing people. So that's just the kind of the overall commentary. But as an individual employee myself, here's what I'm looking forward to is that very first one that Sean talked about, recall. I've gotten really accustomed to the current capabilities of document versioning. So I don't need to keep a V1, V2, V3 of my docs as I change. I can go back in within the doc and get prior versions. It makes it so much easier. But if now I can look across all my documents, I've got at any given time 7, 8, 9 different presentations I'm working on for different audiences, but all similar content. And I can't tell you how many times I say, you know what, I got a slide or I modified a slide. I want to use that in this other one. How do I find it? If it can help me find that content across my documents, if it can help me recall an email that I sent that I don't remember who I sent it to, or a Teams chat and a conversation, but I don't remember who was on the chat. If it can help me, especially now in my advanced years of my career, Tom, I've got a little less RAM up in the noggin now. And I've got probably the same amount of RAM, but it's full. I have no memory left.
Same amount of me today.
Yeah. So if it can help me operate at a more efficient level, it's going to be huge.
That's a really cool analysis. And Dina, so the customer that we've spoken to about this, as I mentioned at the top of the discussion, it brings in the question of hardware renewal, right? Quite conspicuously, of course, especially when you're looking at machines which are, I guess, potentially more expensive, but potentially much more impactful than your average hardware renewal might present. And this brings with it issues related to DEX, to hardware renewal, to budgets, etc. Can you give an overview maybe of what these essentials are in general and as they might pertain specifically here?
Yeah, that could be plentiful of things. And it's not just deploying any new hardware, whether it's updating NPUs, devices like the AI driven devices, Windows 11, AI centric features that are embedded within Windows 11 that would do all of the recognizing of speech, understanding images, or improving the battery life, and everything that Sean and Tim have mentioned earlier. Pretty good considerations is not just to replace the device for the sake of it. So we need to keep sustainability in mind as well. So we need to have a role-based access control kind of consideration or metric in the background, or attribute-based access control, how much we are using the devices that we already have in place, and actually how it would be helpful for us to do any advancement or replacement into those hardware to help us pre-see or preset the scene before making the decision to purchase extra devices or expensive devices or AI driven devices, right? So we need to do pre-planning to understand, like capacity planning, more or less, how these hardwares are going to be utilized and what is the current utilization of our employees. So looking at it from human perspective, being very careful of the benefits that it would add and the profiles and the roles that we are going to replace those devices for, whether they are on entry level, mid level, managers, executives, etc. And of course, depending on their departments and roles later on. So all of that is to be put into consideration, which we have not been putting in the past before considering DEX into the equation. We were just replacing devices when they were expiring or when it was due to be renewed, etc. Putting Copilot in place as well, or Copilot Plus, deploying all of those new technology, AI driven, we need to also keep proper data governance. We need to keep in place security aspects and compliance. If there it would have an impact, and we can have an AI impact assessment just to look at the risk and privacy implications, like Tim was looking at that or highlighting that in the previous sentence, and ensure the compliance of the regulations within their geographical restrictions, if there is any, or the company restrictions, if there is any, and making sure that we have the data labeling, have correct and accurate data labeling for the crucial AI understanding and processing. So whatever we're looking at from an AI perspective is labeled properly and tagged in an easier manner for us to be using it multiple and across.
Absolutely. And Tim put in the chat when we were discussing this theme that it's not just a matter of suitable technology. It's also a matter of digital adoption, right, Tim? And that's obviously a thing we've spoken about a lot this year. But it does spring to mind when you're actually giving out new machines with radically new functionality, right?
Yeah, digital adoption has always been a struggle for IT. We focus on the bits and the bytes. How do we configure it? How do we roll it out? And then it's up to the business. It's up to the employees to figure out how to use it or how to be trained on it. It's a perennial struggle, and it comes down to a couple of things. One, people need to be educated on even just the art of the possible. Why are you giving this to me? What am I going? Not only what am I going to be able to do, but what are your expectations that I should do with it? There's obviously a business reason that we're making this change in hardware or software. What's your expectation? And then once I understand what I can do, what I should do, most importantly, how do I do it? Where's the training? How do you educate me on actual mechanics of using this new piece of technology? Sure, AI is going to make it easier, but it comes with a certain element of fear as well as of learning that new technology. The second part is there's this underlying fear, and I don't like to use the word fear, but it's a concern in IT that people might make mistakes, right? They might use it the wrong way, or we might not have the right controls around it. So there's hesitancy or delay in providing that access. We need to make sure we understand it fully, that people understand how to use it, that they don't screw it up. And then the last part is in terms of adoption is many new technologies are delayed while security teams assess that no harm can come from that new technology, either inadvertently or intentionally, even an internal bad actor. So there's lots of delays that get introduced with stress testing and validation. And if there is a finding, then what controls are you going to put around that finding? I'll give you one quick example, and I'll date myself. When the BlackBerrys first came out, they were email only. And the big concern in security was They integrated a cell phone with the email device, and now we have two things on one machine. What will people be able to do with that? And then, oh my God, they put a cell phone on it. People can now take pictures and email those pictures. So we actually had to disable the camera on the Blackberries to avoid that security problem. So new technology, yeah, those are integrated tech. Now we've solved those issues, but new tech always has security and adoption concerns that delay enterprises from taking full advantage of what's available.
So the old Blackberries had cameras, did they, Tim? I mean,
The old BlackBerry had no camera and no cell phone. It was just email.
Okay, right. Sorry. Yeah. So, Dina, you started to allude there to the kind of process of pairing employees with the right hardware and software, and how AI on the sort of DEX analysis side is starting to sort of help iterate that process. And that's something that the customer I've been alluding to was also excited about. And this kind of brings into focus the issue of personas. And we're gonna ask Tim about personas as well, because he described them as the Bigfoot of IT, and I want to pick up on that comment. But first of all, how do you see this as becoming increasingly relevant in a use case such as this?
I think it's very relevant to be able to customize, and it's all about customization, right? We all have the same technology, more or less available at our fingertips. But how we utilize it, this is different, right? Even if we are in the same role, in the same organization, we might be doing things differently, right? Everybody's having their own creative aspect of their input into whatever they are trying to deliver. So having an assessment of persona and keeping in mind the usage of how you are using the devices and technology in hand versus the assigned profile. So it's a hardware and a software kind of assessment, goes hand in hand. However, this is not where it stops. This is where it starts. Actually, it doesn't stop there, because you need to keep DEX in mind as well. You need to keep the experience that I'm getting. So I might want to have a device of X specs and the application of AI, X, Y, and Z, but then putting them together might not be compatible, or it might not be optimal for the increase of my productivity as an employee or even as a user. So can we use AI to help in the process in the background, or can AI help us with analytics in the background? Of course, because it will give us a lot of insight. Like going back to the example Tim was referring to earlier, having 5, 6 slides open, and you're looking for which one did I update, or which piece of information do I remember. I just maybe remember the name of the file. I don't remember who I sent it to, when did I share it, or even was it through my email, Teams chat, or even kept on SharePoint example, right? So looking at things across, having that full visibility, could you use AI in the background to do that? For sure. And it will save you time, energy, and it will be more accurate, not just like a specific guessing point. So it will improve our way of looking into analytics and into actually consuming or understanding the persona and doing the persona assessment. So which will lead us to better utilization or better allocation of whatever the product that it's going to be, a hardware or a software, to improve the employees' productivity, let's say.
Do you agree with that, Tim? Is the Bigfoot of IT about to be captured at last? In a zoo? Is what is happening?
So we've talked about it. So here's the analogy with Bigfoot. We've talked about it for decades. People claim to have seen it or solved a mystery, but it's still folklore. We're not quite sure if Bigfoot actually exists or if we can solve the problem. I think, to Dina's point, matching what people use, what they do with that, and how they work, where they work, and matching that with the right hardware and software for their role and their job type. It's been a struggle for a long time, but now with full visibility into all those elements, and AI to be able to correlate and assess the data, which is too much volume for a human to do. AI can now do the analysis, make the recommendation, and then you integrate that with your delivery platforms. Now you've found Bigfoot. Now you've got the ability to say, yes, it's real. We have it here, and here's what it looks like.
Any final thoughts, Tim, on the sort of role of data in this more generally, whether it's for hardware renewal on an individual user basis or on a sort of mass scale, and how new sources of data are changing the dynamic and the art of the possible in this area?
I think it's a combination of new data and new data collection, because AI is only as smart as the data that it has available to it. So being able to feed the engine with the right information to make the right decisions is a big piece of it. But to go back to these PCs, the standard process of hardware refresh and hardware renewal has changed. We've kind of made that shift from away from age-based refresh, which was static. You get a new machine every 4 years, whether you want it or need it or not, and moved to performance-based refresh. You get the right device at the right time based on what you do. I think the change now with this performance escalation in devices is that hardware may no longer be chasing software load. In other words, you get a new machine because the old machine just simply can't keep up with the advancements of software. With these new capabilities and new capacities, that hardware may have certainly not an infinite lifespan, but definitely a longer lifespan than we've seen in the past. And software may not be the determining factor. Software load might not be that determining factor on when you get a new machine. The capacities for creating data and for delivering the work that you do is going to be much different now. And it'd be really interesting to see for any given device, what does all of this mean? Both the analytics on do you even need a machine and the new devices with capacity. We could see people, to the sustainability question, even why get rid of a machine in 4 or 5 years when they can now last, 5, 6, 7 years. It's going to be interesting to see where it goes.
Dina, you've been on absolute fire today in particular. Any last thoughts on this before we wrap it up?
I agree, and I think it will help us eventually get rid of our footprints of hardware out there, right? So the longer we can sustain a hardware device, the better it will be for the environment and us delivering, replacing, and cost reduction, etc. So all of the beautiful value that we can get out of this. And I think using AI, having smarter NPUs, having smarter devices now, it's a big investment at the meantime, but it will be more sustainable as we go. So we might see a little bit of a degradation in the hardware aspect and then more on the software one, but it would still, the hardware that we have right now would stay a little bit longer than we anticipate, I assume.
Well, I gotta say, everyone, you've renewed my hardware today.
You still need to go take a nap, Tom.
I do need to take a nap. In fact, I need to take a week off, which is what I'm about.
There you go.
Yeah,
go somewhere remote.
Off to Wales. Tomorrow
Excellent.
morning. So lovely to talk to you all. A really great conversation, and thank you so much. See you all soon, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
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 To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. If you'd like to learn more about how NextThink can help you improve your digital employee experience, head over to nextthink.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.